Hello. Hi. This is I'm the master of the Graduate House, and I would like to welcome you all for this seminar. And this is a special occasion celebrating the 15th anniversary of the Graduate House. And it is my great honor here to introduce you Dr. Gao, Andy Gao. He is an associate professor, and an associate professor only 4 years after he received his PhD. I think that's a great achievement, and I think it took me more than 10 years to achieve that. Well, maybe 6 years. Anyway, it's a great achievement, I think. And he's in the Faculty of Education, the University of Hong Kong. He graduated from the University of Hong Kong in 2008. So in 4 years' time, he becomes associate professor. His current research and teaching interests are in the areas of language learning narratives, language teaching education learner autonomy, reading, and sociolinguistics. I have no idea what these terms are. I'm in the area of endocrinology myself. I'm a scientist. Anyway, he published in all the major journals, including Applied Linguistics, English Language Teaching Journal, and so on and so forth. He is also associate editor for the Asia Pacific Education Researcher and served on the editorial and advisory board of the TESOL Quarterly. He is also current president of Hong Kong Association for Applied Linguistics. A very well achieved scholar in our university. So he's going to talk to you on academic publishing, on Long March, and I myself is longing to listen to his talk. So without further ado, Professor Dr. Gao.
Deciding time, I didn't realize it was a Friday evening before the Chinese New Year, because my style is whenever I see something coming up, I always decide to finish it as the first available time slot, because I don't want to have a backlog of things. So when I decided the time, and then I realized this was a Friday evening before the Chinese New Year, so I would expect a small turnout, and the timing really attests to the popularity or the importance of the topic for, and as it turned out, it seems to be quite many of you, most of you here, and think this is really important topic. I wanted to a little bit adjust it, because when I go through the abstract I gave to the Graduate House, and I realized that there's actually, the abstract says something about Korea. So really the top title should be being academic on Long March. And then I don't have Long March yet, so this is something I will be exploring together in this talk. And I do recognize that, so I really need to think ahead. I do realize that the academic publishing is a very challenging and important task. Particularly we have this culture of publish or perish culture in the universities, so I would spend a lot of time in the talk talking about these issues relating to academic publishing. And also, I really want to invite you, including myself, to think ahead. What is ahead beyond our PhD studies? Many of you now just struggling with completing the study, but it's also important for us to think ahead. And as I said, given my years' experiences, actually, we are doing the thinking ahead together. Not just I'm guiding you, but we are exploring the issue of sustainable academic careers ahead together. I just want to take a few minutes to imagine what it will be an academic. What will it be? Is there anybody can volunteer an answer or
Long working hours.
long working hours? So you seem that you have already a very pessimistic imagination of the work ahead. Anything else?
Writing every day.
Writing every day. And what else? And what do people in this world think of academic? When you decided to do PhD, what do you think? What will become of after you graduate from your studies? Satisfying. And what kind of job? I mean, do you have any imagination of the kind of job you would have ahead of before you joined the PhD program? Now, I didn't have a closest exactly analogy, but I did find that this is something like closer to what I want to say. Teachers. So your friends who are not doing PhD thinking you will be something like, oh, you will be, when you graduate, will be educating bright minds, and your parents were thinking you'll be failing students who are a bit undisciplined, and the society think you just travel. I mean, a lot of society will think academics just traveling with university fundings, go to different places, and in meeting different people, and your friends or your students, like one of you just said, actually sleep under the table and emailing all the time to your future supervisees. What I think we should do is this kind of things, but actually what I do is a lot of writing, a lot of trouble, a lot of problems. So that's. And then how we can, say, be successful in our pursuit of academic career. Reflecting on my experiences, probably very limited because I only have very short working experience and I work largely in education. So that's the kind of things I'm going to tell you may be relevant, maybe Professor Chow can correct me if I said something terribly wrong, but I think there's a few elements there I would call DNAs for good academic career. The first, of course, a good degree from reputable universities and solid research with meaningful, fresh contributions to the field. And we're talking about University of Hong Kong here, and University of Hong Kong, as you know, ranked number 8 in 22 in some of the university ranking exercises. And this is amazing because unlike many other countries who has their university before us, and Hong Kong has never had a strong army and go around to colonize different parts of the world or find terrorists to fight. So this is amazing for a region or country, a city to achieve number 22 or 30 in university ranking. So you are doing a very good studies in a very good university in this world. Of course, if you do this in effective education, you realize that you're actually working in number 8 worldwide. This is important. One thing about good university is it gives you a good networking opportunity. Situations like this, or different kind of courses organized by graduate school, like the one called Research Skill Development course, and also the kind of conference opportunities and the kind of international exchange give you a lot of opportunities for networking. And this is really important. And I think that this importance of academic socialization. When you were doing PhD, the kind of person who do similar topics will be very important for you, because then you can discuss your topics. I'm not saying the other people who are doing other topics are not that important, but as we'll say, people doing similar topics will be particularly important to you, because that's the time you're exploring together, you engage with each other in critical debates, discussion that will help refine your thesis study. But after, say, within 5 years graduating from your PhD studies, I think people, especially senior people, in the broad area of your research, for instance, just take faculty education. So if you're now doing English language education topics, around the time you're completing your study, the people who are working in the area will be very important to you. But within 5 years, those who are working in the broad education topics, especially senior people, will be very important for you. Because at this university, at the end of the 5th year, you have to submit a tenure application. And those who will review a tenure application will be not necessarily from the field you study, will be from the broad field of, say, educational research, even other research areas. So it's important for you to make friends with people who are in the other areas or working on the topics. But I think within 10 years, after you graduate from your doctoral studies, and people working in other departments or faculties will be important to you. Because if you progress smoothly, and you probably will sitting in different kind of committees at the university or inter-faculty level, and of course you want friends with you in the committee so you can have better influence if you want. So the friends who you make in other faculties will be very important. Imagine you have the, say, 30th anniversary of Graduate House, you have a social dinner, and all of you come back, and suddenly one of you start a conversation and say, well, do you know who got appointed to be PVC in our university? And the other guy said, who is that guy? You know, that guy who always sleeps during the ethics course, the graduate school course of research ethics? Oh, that's the guy. Oh, and you know each other because you take this course in the graduate research ethics, and you know this person, and you get to know each other. And this guy maybe one day become PVC or whatever, or maybe work in a multinational corporation responsible for research and development budget. It's very important for you to know this kind of person, and you have, of course, you have to make friends as early as possible. Well, if you say think about 30 years or 20 years ahead, basically everybody will be important to you because you'll be in a different situation. For instance, if you become PVC and you have to look for donors, whoever have money. And of course, at this stage, academic publication is very important because it gives you, well, in the past, if you have PhD, it's entry to academic career. But nowadays, it's not only PhD degree. As I said, you also need to have networking association, friends, basically. But then you also need a strong or track record of academic publication. And we'll deal with this a little bit in a few minutes. And then this is something I'll be thinking these days. The additional is a sustainable research scheme. It's something you'll be spending years on it, and it becomes part of an identity, academic identity. For instance, Professor John works on one particular virus. No. Okay. Homo. Okay. It's like on the day he takes up the job, he's taking a vow, saying, "I'll be spending the rest of my life on this particular Homo. I'll be thinking about at least 6 hours a day, no matter I'm healthy or not healthy, I'm in the office or on holiday, until retirement do us apart." So this is something you have to think about. It's because it becomes a part of your academic identity, and you want your name to be associated with a particular, say, Homo or virus or particular area. This is something I'm still searching something to identify myself with. And well, I have to tell it a bit bad news because, as I said, it's very challenging for you to become academic these days. Now this is a few statistics you have to remember. From 2005 to 2009, over 100,000 PhD graduates found for 16,000 new professorship in the United States. That means 16% of doctoral graduates will become academics in the United States. And of course, the United States also have a large research and development institutes which don't necessarily become academic. You can work in those research and development institutes of multinational corporations and to extend it from a doctoral work. But this is some figures for you to think about. Canada, similar situation, 4,800 PhD graduates for 2,616 faculty positions. So roughly 1 out of 2. It's not bad because 1 out of 2 is really good in comparison to the United States. In China, we have this quantum leap. In 1978, you only have 18 doctoral students. Now we have like 208,038 doctoral graduates in 2006. Although we have to say, this region, including Hong Kong, not Taiwan, Macau, or mainland China, or Singapore, the tertiary education sector is actually expanding. Therefore, there are opportunities for people for this institution to take graduates. But still, the situations for you is, well, it's easier for you to become a doctoral student, but has become increasingly difficulty to pursue an academic career. Probably some of us, we in the end end up in not in the universities, but in other places. But the kind of skills we will be talking about, like socialization, whatever, and these are transferable skills, really. It's important for. So how do we cope with this reality? This is something I did in my career. We have to have a clear goal setting. So you have to think ahead. What is it like to be an academic? That's something I just did with you. Distance measurement. So if you work in medical science and you go to this your supervisor's website and to find out what your supervisor has achieved before he got position, and then you measure what you are now and to the level of what your supervisor has achieved at the time he got the position. Probably you have to add a little bit more because, as I said, it has been increasingly difficult for people to graduate become an academic. You have to identify milestones, organize efforts to achieve short-term and long-term objectives. Sort of do a market survey. In a sense, you go through different departments, websites, and universities that you're interested in to look at the profile of these people. Sometimes you find, I think if you do a little bit profiling search, you'll find some departments, some faculty have these aging problems. A lot of professors, but not many junior ones. That means the department has been good in research and everything, but they have, in the future, that means that you have a lot of vacancies. Then you have to do sort of what I call self-regulate efforts, disciplined efforts towards being an independent research writer. You have to do something. As I said, it's no longer, a PhD is no longer just a qualification for you to enter the academic career. You have to do more than your PhD during your study. The importance of network building, as I mentioned before. Oh, of course, timely completion of doctoral study. If you want to say, ask me this question, I will explain it a bit later. Don't know what happens. I do appreciate the kind of challenge many of us are having in publishing. because some people say, according to research on academic publications in our field, is we are located as sort of a regional university, although we have achieved quite amazing reputation, but still we are in so-called periphery context. The major leading journals are in UK or United States, but not in our control. And sometimes you may have lack of expertise, either with not enough knowledge about the particular topic you want to publish, or you have these methodological problems. And you may find you are particularly disadvantaged being a non-native speaker of English, although it does not mean that native speakers of English have particular advantage, because as a reviewer, as a journal editor, I've seen a lot of submissions from native and non-native speakers, and academic writing is a strange kind of writing, and you can master it regardless whether you're a native speaker or a non-native speaker. And sometimes, some of you have the problem of full-time and part-time, because I'm aware some of these students nowadays are part-time, so or even you're full-time, you're being asked to do a lot of things in the lab or by the department, and it's a time issue. And you have to consider about completion of doctoral study, and then you have to cope with the duties, and then you have to think about the publication. But I have to tell you, all the academics, they have to be multitasking, because when you become academics, you'll find you've been struggling with a lot of things at the same time: teaching, research, service, and many other things. And this is also, there's a job insecurity and in creative arts, because the statistic I showed you is not promising. And you really have to work really hard to have creative arts. A major challenge for many of us is the structure of doctoral study. So we always struggle with doctoral study and whether we have extra energy for publishing. So this is something really, as a student, you have to really have a very, somehow manage your time really well. But there are opportunities. We have more opportunities and more resources. So you have this kind of talk, you have this all sorts of resources. Graduate school will provide some resources for your conference attendance, and of course your supervisor, or many of them are very willing to support your publication as well. And there's more journals and publishing outlets. I think in some science journal, because as social science researcher, we're talking about, oh, it's very nice for us to get into SSCI journal, the Social Science Citation Index. But I think for science, they're really interested about high impact factor. Because for our journal, I'll be very happy to get a paper published in the journal with, let's say, 0.6 impact factor. And for this, it will become a laughing stock for medical faculty, because they want to publish in journals with 20 or 30 impact factor. So this really, but we do have more publishing outlets, and that's why you have to think about which journal I should publish. And it's always a dilemma for many of us. I'll talk about later. There are opportunities in addition to completing your studies. If you're working in social sciences, I know in sciences and medical sciences, actually students are sort of forced or encouraged to publish right away as you go along with your study. But for social sciences, you can also publish things like good literature review, especially methodological review ones, because you have to do one when you're doing your PhD dissertation. And there's always a good journals looking for that. Well, the empirical part usually is the most publishable part of your thesis. So if you can always, it's like you can cut a piece out of your major study and look at a different angle, and you can publish in one journal and the other part, because a journal article can never contain all the information you want to convey in a whole doctoral thesis. So you probably have to split a bit into different publications. And don't forget, if you're particularly working in social sciences, to publish an entire thesis as a research monograph. And I have to say, a research monograph usually have a different structural organization in comparison with thesis. And if you submit a book proposal based on thesis, and your publisher wants to publish it, and you always get told that you should make it different from your thesis. Because partly theses these days are always available online. So the libraries in the United States, for instance, will never buy a book that they can access online in some university's library in the format of thesis. So we always ask you to make it different. But how do you make it different? A simple thing is you chop off the methodology part, methodology chapter. Because in a thesis, you'll be asked to write a very elaborate methodology section or chapter, but in the book, you can probably summarize the whole major things as part of the introduction, but you highlight more on the findings, an argument you want to make. But don't forget it published with thesis in the book form after you publish in different kind of articles. Because I realize it's really important for some universities when they employ you. For instance, I believe partly the University of Hong Kong was willing to employ me as an associate professor because I published a research monograph based on my thesis. Because this is one of the, as they say, important criteria. But maybe there's other reasons. Now we'll be talking about some technical issues as submitting manuscripts to journals. Now I think I have to ask you a few questions before submitting manuscripts to journals. And sometimes when I ask questions, people would think, well, these are serious questions, but I do mean these questions to be serious. You have to think about, why do I get published? Your answer will be, why do we get published? Any, yes? Come on. Great. I know many of you would say, oh, if I get publication, then I get a job. There's kind of instrumental reason. I have to say this is an instrumental reason is very important, but it's not enough because, as I said, when you take the academic career, it's like you're taking a marriage vow. You've been spending your whole life and all the time thinking about the same kind of a hormone virus. So it has to be some sort of intrinsic interest in the topic that will carry you further when the tidings are particularly not favorable. And so you may have to also think about how this publication relate to my growth as an academic researcher. If you think just the way, oh, I just want to get published, I think this is a question. It's not to get a job. It's not that a sufficient answer, because you have to think about how can I benefit from the experience of submitting and surviving the whole review process. And because even you get rejected from the journal, you still can learn something. Although the most important thing you want to learn is how to deal with emotional kind of phase. And I have to tell you, when I first received review comments from my first ever journal submission, and I saw the comments, I felt terrible for 3 days. Because you put efforts in writing a manuscript and you send a journal, and then you came back with these nasty reviews, and then you say, oh, what's the meaning of doing this? I have to tell you, you have to be tough or thick-skinned. You don't have to be sorry for producing lousy work. You also have to think about how important this is to me. really have to think about, is it really academic career is something you really want to pursue? Because it really demands you your utmost, absolute kind of devotion. It's not some people say, oh, because of academic career I can have long holidays and a lot of travel time. It's not things like that. Yes, well, what I want to gain from having submitted to a journal, you may think about, oh, you want to submit it to a top-tier journal, you just want to get feedback, you don't really hope this journal will take your manuscript, but you want to have quality feedback, and sometimes it might work, other times it might not, because if you submit extremely lousy paper to a top-tier journal, you might get 2 or 3 sentences saying your manuscript is lousy, and you didn't get any quality feedback. So you really have to think about, it's a balance of learning and balance of the, positive acceptance. And then, that big question, what kind of journal will publish my submission? And this is always a good question. It's a technical question, and you might explore it with your supervisor, and sometimes supervisor will give you some advice, but you have to also think about, because your supervisor is in a very different career stage, especially when you publish the piece with him or her, and he have different concerns, so he may not want a piece of work with his name or her name on it to appear in a very low-tier journal. But you actually wanted to get out, so you have to somehow adjust a little bit and sort of accommodate your supervisor expectation while meeting your own demands, really, or needs. This is the same kind of questions. This is a question you have to think. I really encourage you that when you submit a manuscript to journal, you have to think that, but I think you really want the joy of publishing. Because the first time I saw my article in print, I have to admit, I had this joy. Maybe you can call it vanity, sense of vanity, but now I suppose I was thinking it's just a sense of vanity, but I did have this kind of joy to see my writing in print. And I don't know, maybe the second day some people will start criticizing the kind of argument I made, but whatever it is, I'll be happy if somebody criticizes my wrong argument rather than nobody really paying attention to my argument. I really want to share research finding. This is as called intrinsic motivation, which will carry you further in your future academic endeavor. And this is particularly important because you may suffer a lot without this. And you want to gain confidence from the publication process. I'm the kind of person, I would not target my submission to top-tier journal. I try to match the quality of my paper to the kind of standing of the journal. I know if I submit to a top-tier journal, I will never get in. So why do I waste my time if I don't get, well, maybe it's kind of a conservative way of thinking. And also, we want to make meaningful contribution to the academic community. It's something I really want all of us to have if we want to pursue an academic career. Although we know we have to do this just simply to survive. But if you want to advance, thinking of survival is not enough. It's not easy to decide whether always target the top journal or starting from a low-ranking journal and then move upward. I think I've been doing this sort of a sun in the middle line. The first journal article I published is sort of regional journal. The second was sort of a middle, not exactly top. And then I've been slowly moving upward a little bit. And then when I came to University of Hong Kong, my division head told me, Andy, you've been publishing not so good, your journal, the journal you're publishing has been declining. So I said, oh, really? And that's because he may have a different kind of idea about what comes considered as kind of top journal. But you always have to sort of struggle a bit. Accommodate somebody's expectation while you have to satisfy your own needs. I think the most important principles is that we do not want to get discouraged. It's a tough, long process. And it's important that we do not get discouraged at the very beginning. For me, it's important for me to gradually build up my confidence. And then also we need to grow. If you submit, as I said, if you submit your manuscript to some journals, and the reviewers will think, well, this is just rubbish, and why editor and send it for review? Sometimes we have this kind of situation. And I think also it's important we need something out in time, because I would say in the past, if you finish your PhD, you may be given, say, if you're very good, you may be given 1 or 2 years as a PDF or postdoctoral fellow in some university to publish your research. And that's how university maximize the kind of a publication potential of you in some universities, and happens a lot in American universities like that. But nowadays, I think often we don't get this kind of time. You have to, when you graduate, when you submit your application for jobs, you already have to something at least in press. And it's a very difficult process. And I actually have some sort of video link talking about the review process, which gives you some insight into the review process. So when you submit a manuscript, it goes through for review. I'm not sure whether you have seen this before. Have you seen that as a YouTube video called Scientific Review? Okay, then I can simply play it.
Es ist halt gelungen, die Front-and-Weiter-Formation zu durchbrechen. Im Süden hat der Gegner Zossen genommen und stößt auf Stahnsdorf vor. Der Feind operiert jetzt am nördlichen Stadtrand zwischen Frohnau und Pankow, und im Osten ist der Feind bis zur Linie Lichtenberg, Marsdorf, Karlshorst gelangt.
Mit dem Angriff Steiners wird das alles in Ordnung kommen.
Mein Führer, Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren. Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Es bleiben im Raum Keitel, Jodl, Krebs und Butter.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl! Wer schickt Sie? Weil wir fragen, Sie mein Befehl zu übersetzen! Das kann ich denken. Ja, wie der belogen! Jeder hat mit belogen, sondern ihr Beschiss! Die gesamte Generalität ist in zweigleisig Haufen, niederträchtiger, treuloser Feiglinge!
Mein Führer, ich kann nicht zulassen, dass die Soldaten, die für Sie
Nicht als Feiglinge, Verräter, Versager!
Mein Führer, was Sie da sagen, ist ungefährlich.
Die Generalität ist das Geschmolz des deutschen Volkes! Sie ist ohne Ehren! Sie nennen sich Generale, weil Sie Jahre auf Militärakademie zugebracht haben, nur um zu lernen, wie man besser Gabe hält. Jahrelang hat das Militär meine Aktionen nur behindert. hat mich jeden nur den Widerstand in den Weg gelegt. Ich hatte gut daran getan. Und darin alle höheren Offiziere liquidiert zu lassen, wie Stalin. Ich war nie auf einer Akademie. Und doch habe ich allein aus Blitz bestellt, ganz Europa erobert. Verräter! Von allem Anfang an bin ich so verraten und betrogen worden. Es wurde ein ungeheurer Verrat geübt am deutschen Volke. Aber alle diese Verräterinnen bezahlen. Mit ihrem eigenen Blut werden sie bezahlen. Sie werden ersaufen in ihrem eigenen Blut.
Bitte gerne. Jetzt beruhig dich doch.
Meine Befehle sind in den Wind gesprochen. Es ist unmöglich, unter diesen Umständen zu führen. Es ist aus. Der Krieg ist verloren. Aber wenn Sie, meine Herren, glauben, dass ich deshalb Berlin verlasse, irren Sie sich gewaltig. Eher jag ich mir eine Kugel durch den Kopf. Tun Sie, was Sie wollen.
Well, although it's a sort of a comedy kind of thing, there's quite a few true elements. For instance, the annoying third reviewer. Sometimes it's actually planted by an editor to fail this paper. Because sometimes, and I don't know about medical science or biological science, as a social science journal editor, I usually can just reject paper if I have mixed review. But in order to appear to be a conscientious editor, I would try to look for a third reviewer who actually had who were likely to have a very negative view of the manuscript. So I can reject a paper with enough strong justification. And it's also true, reviewers may not be the top professors. Because in the journal I'm editing now, it allows you to recommend reviewers. But I noticed that some starting research, they have no idea how to recommend reviewers. For instance, they will recommend people who work in the same department as a potential reviewer. Or they will recommend those top professors in the field to be the reviewers. And these people will automatically be ruled out by the editors because, and I have to tell you a very sad truth, anyone who are above associate professor ranks are unlikely to be reviewers because they are so busy with many other things. And it's most likely is a postdoc or just starting assistant professor who want their CV to have something like, I reviewed this manuscript for this journal, to do review. And also, the journal editor would not ask anybody from the same institution to do review for this particular manuscript. What else? Yes, that's pretty much the kind of review process or the kind of thing you experience if you submitted a manuscript journal. You have to be, well, we have to be prepared for this kind of shock when you first get review comments from any journal. Okay, now, just want to highlight a few, just one technical thing, because I'm aware that there's different articles in different articles, journal articles in different disciplines will have a very different format or structure or organization. And my areas, well, you can call it broadly social science. And I've been an editor, but also a reviewer. I do a lot of review these days, and in November alone, I reviewed 8 manuscripts. In the last 2 weeks, I reviewed 4 manuscripts, and I usually do it very quickly. Sometimes it takes a lot of people, my colleagues, a long time to review a manuscript. But for me, because I've been doing so much review work, I begin to pick up the rules. When I look at a manuscript, I can tell whether I can accept it or not. And usually, very important part is the introduction. Yesterday, I just rejected the manuscript simply because when I read the introductory part, I know this manuscript, the study, will not survive the process. And I didn't actually read these findings. I go straight to discussion because I won't have time to talk discussion because discussion is the part we highlight your achievements in your study or in the manuscript. So if I look at this introduction, nothing really insightful or meaningful contribution from your study, and then look at discussion, again nothing, I can probably decide this manuscript will not survive the process. Of course, then I, to justify my decision, I have to go to the methodology and to find out particular problematic parts of your methodology. That's why I want just to go through two introductions. Unfortunately, they are broadly belong to education research. One is from kind of English language teaching kind of a manuscript. The other, because in order to create a different kind of disciplines, the student here, I found a introduction from a speech and hearing science manuscript kind of thing. I want to go through, read this introduction, and decide. It's probably obvious for you which one is better and why this one you think better is better. So, this is the first introduction. I don't know whether you can read it. Let me know if we finish. Say, raise your hands. So, I don't know. Should I change to the second introduction? No problem? It's not that difficult for you to decide which one's better, right? Now you have to tell me why the second one is better than the first one. Anybody has this idea? They can shout, because if you say, well, this one is better because concise. Yeah. Yeah.
Provides a general background at the same time. Research and state clearly what it means to do.
Yes, important. State clearly you want to do, right? And as first one, when I was reading it, as actually I submitted to my journal, right? When I was reading it, I have to use a Cantonese sentence. I don't know what it's about. So now, if I allow me to highlight a few things in the second introduction. When I think about an article, I usually think about in terms of articles actually a research narrative, a narrative of research. And it's kind of a story of your research. And in order to make your story of research attractive, appealing to your readers, you have to come back to what makes the story interesting to your readers. For instance, I always have the energy of TVB drama. The first episode of TVB drama, you always have a lot of. Have you watched TVB drama? It's supposed to be poisoning our brains, but if you watch enough TV drama, you'll find, first episode you will have a lot of tension, a lot of conflicts, and that's sometimes reflected by the second. Basically, it's a published article, so it has to be better than manuscript. Now I highlight some part of this abstract. The red one. What do these words in red one do in this abstract? Define a topic. If you know a little bit about language analysis or discourse analysis, you know this is they define a topic. What the article is about. They define it. How about the blue one? What? What's the function of this blue one? Words in blue. Yeah? Problematize. Yes, problematize. That's what. It's like when you, the first episode of TVB drama, you have a setting. And then, all of a sudden, the setting becomes much more complex because you have different characters coming and they have conflicts. So you have this words, like however complex, however, to make the field complicated. It creates a problem from the field you identify. And then you have these words in green. So the elaboration of the field, but gives people some indication the kind of research methods you're going to use in your article. And yellow one is actually about what kind of argument you're going to make in this particular article. So in one short introduction, it creates the setting, it problematizes it, and it tells you how you're going to address the problems you identify clearly in the setting, and what kind of argument you're going to make. This is what I call a good introduction. And if I try, I mean sometimes I cannot produce that kind of a good introduction, but if you want your manuscript to survive the first few minutes of manuscript review, I suppose you have to produce this kind of a narrative in the very first few sentences. And I said, once you have this kind of a introduction, you basically establish a trust relationship between reviewers. And if you messed up in the beginning, the reviewer will probably try to think about something positive about the manuscript, but if they continue the following parts of the manuscript still sort of confirm the kind of impression the reviewers have about your manuscript, and then it's unlikely for them to give you a positive result to your manuscript. This is one particular thing I want to highlight as being a frequent, well, I won't call myself experienced, but I've been to a lot of review, as reviewer I would look at. The kind of important thing I would look at. Now I'm in going to talk about something else, is the importance of developing research scheme, because you not only want to finish your PhD. Once you finish your PhD, and next thing you have to think about what kind of niche you will occupy in the broad academic community. It would be nice to just have an empty space in the academic research, and you jump onto it and take hold of it and start building around it and colonize that area and make yourself a name. As I said, this is something I also need to do. I need to do. So that's why I'm telling you something I haven't achieved it. But that's no problem. That's just a kind of warning. I've been always thinking about the problem of research scheme or a niche for myself, these things. Because it's important to think about, are you going to really spend 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years on one particular hormone, or virus, or guinea pig? And can you think about if you have to spend 8 hours a day or 7 days a week and keep thinking about this particular hormone virus? What is life like? It's going to be like. If you think about your life is sort of associated with this one singular thing in the future. Is it really something you look forward to? Somebody should go ahead. Oh, you want to change your topic immediately? That's what I wanted to do. After doing my PhD, the first thing I want to do, I finished it. I really finished it. But then I lost the clear advantage that the 4 good years have actually paved a good foundation for me, and I go to a different direction. So you actually struggle a bit if you change topics. A scheme is some sort of theory research ideas related to the same topics or area that we can pursue in the serious studies. Something that you can do for 20 years or 30 years, and you still be producing cutting edge research in this area. I don't know how you do with hormone with 20 years or 15 years. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe you can share a little bit. So much to do. It will lead us to new relevant research topics. Sometimes we will involve, it's like a butterfly, and then we get Dr. Lee talking about the transformation of butterfly. But often it will be something, a niche for us to settle down and prosper and expand our academic careers. It's very important, but I haven't much experience to share with you. Maybe Professor Chung had better experience than I and than mine. Very important, because people want to say, oh, Professor Chow, and they want to have easier thing to relate to their name. Like some of you would say assessment, doing researching assessment. In the future, you should really say, oh, Professor of Assessment. So it gives you identity. And it's important in a sense, then you'll become an expert in something, you'll get invitations to speak as a keynote speakers in international conferences. If governments want to have a particular consultant on a particular area, they will invite you, for instance, it's just an assessment, and they will invite you as a consultant. So your research is going to have likely to have a far more extensive impact in the community. Well, it's very important because I'm concluding my talk. As I said, I just want to summarize. And it's more for me to remind you that it's critical for us to excel as doctoral students in terms of timely completion. When I was talking about application and other pursuits and academic socialization, I would say balance is needed. It's particularly important for you to be a community like Graduate House, because you have people in different kind of disciplines, and you have time together and different kind of social events, and these friends will become long-term academic supporters in the future. But as I said, well, you have to keep the balance. And don't forget, there's a lot of things for us to do in life. Well, apologize that I have to get you here on